Hello, this is Edith Newmeyer, and I'm the author of The Mystery of Adam. Well, this is my second video on Martin Luther, and I have done one a couple of weeks ago when I got back from Germany, and so I want to continue talking about Luther. Last time I shared a little more about his wife, and it was really interesting to find out about how, not only what kind of strong woman she was, but also how Luther just absolutely valued her, honored her, and supported her. And I said last time that I heard some and read some really strange statements by Luther. For instance, the one when he was supposed to have brought up the idea of women. When it comes to women, there's the three K's: the Kinder, Küche, Kirche. Okay, children, kitchen, and church. Now, the reason why Luther most likely was thinking like that is because of his culture. Okay, his culture was giving women no choice. It's the only choice women had. There's another thing that Luther said, that if women don't get married, they have to become a prostitute. Well, that's because that was the case. Women couldn't support themselves because women were not accepted in the workplace. The only thing they could be is maids, and so there was not too much choice for them to support themselves. And we saw that last time with Katharina, his wife. She didn't want to get married. She was kind of forced after she left the convent. She was forced to get, she was actually a high-standing woman, and so the only really option she had was to get married, and so everybody pushed her to get married after she left the abbey. And however, we know that Katharina had lots and lots of gifts, which Luther totally supported. She was a good manager. She was actually also a good writer. She was a good speaker. She was so many things, not just a mother and a housewife, but she was so much more. Matter of fact, Luther, when he was educating new students that wanted to learn, like he had almost like his own seminary, and so he had lots of students that lived in their house, and so every day after they ate together, they had what they called the round table, and Luther was the one who accepted Katharina, his wife, at the round table. Nobody else. I mean, of course, those students were all men, which is understandable because during Luther's time, women really were not necessarily educated. They got an education if they would be going to a monastery. They would get educated, like Katharina was. But outside the monastery, they were not necessarily educated. But Luther accepted Katharina. Matter of fact, he invited her. She was actually a common person at that round table. And she was also accepted to speak during the round table. In other words, Luther wanted her opinion at that round table. She was not just a quiet guest, but she was a participant. So all this information that I have gathered from Luther makes me now believe that Luther really was, number one, influenced by his culture. His culture did not accept women, and so Luther had to kind of go along with it. Women had to go along with it. And so it was just a natural thing for him to do or to say the things he did. However, I do not suspect that Luther was really putting down women or putting them in a secondary position to men. I think what he did was only influenced by the culture, but he also was a lot more open towards women getting active and doing a lot more things than what these women were allowed to do during Luther's time. So it showed me clearly the effect culture has on people, the reformers, for instance. Luther was foremost a reformer of the church. In other words, his major point, his discovery was the fact that we are saved through grace only. And that was something that Luther felt that he had to educate people about. So, but while he was doing that, Luther was also very open with women. And so, which again showed me so clearly that we cannot separate culture from how people think. So, yep, this is Luther, I think, was a good example to really learn about how women were treated or have been treated for centuries. And again, how much people are influenced by culture. We think so much that everything that we hear in church is biblical, but it isn't. It's not. Especially when we look at what kinds of jobs and what kinds of things women can do are just totally dependent on culture. We can look at Paul's writings, and of course we have to assume, and I'm saying assuming, but it's more than assuming. It is actually seeing it. I can see it with my own eyes as I read his writings. I can see how his writing has been influenced by the culture, by the literature, by the education of um, Paul, how he was influenced, by the Greek beliefs. So I think this is something very important that I had to experience, and that's why I wanted to share it, because my book has a very uh, big section on the history of male dominance. And it is very hard, it's very hard, as we know today, to get rid of this male dominance. It's not something that happens automatically. It didn't happen automatically to Paul. God opened his eyes slowly and had him realize that women were extreme valuable helpers or co-workers in this task to evangelize the world. And so I can see that Paul, also like Luther, um, accepting women in the ministry, that the Holy Spirit is also working in women. And these men have realized that. So I am glad that I had a chance to learn about Luther, so I don't have such a negative attitude about him anymore. I always thought, he was kind of, yeah, strict on women, or putting them down, but that's all is just not the right thing for him to use. He was just simply understanding the situation women were in, and not necessarily liking that situation. I mean, if I see how he treated Katharina, I realize that's not what he believed. If he probably would have been able to change things, I think he would have changed some of the things. And I think eventually, as we know, the Lutheran Church right now has women pastors. So there was openness for women to be involved in the ministry. So yeah, I'm going to finish up today. And next time I want to continue with, actually not continue, but I want to start with marriage. I talked about a lot about church, and I have kind of skipped the chapter about marriage, and so next time I want to pick up on that. So until next time, keep studying and researching, because that is extremely important.